Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Guiding Voices. My name is Ernest van der Kwast. I'm very happy that you all came here on this Saturday, on the first day of the Boekenweek. So please buy books. You get a book free with it. Our guest tonight is Édouard Louis. It is a privilege to be able to speak to him about his brilliant new book, Veranderen Methode. And I hope that you join in with the conversation as well. At the end of the program, there will be the opportunity to ask questions, and please do. I want to thank our partners who made this event possible. Arminius, het Rotterdamsch Leeskabinet, and the Dutch publisher of Mr. Louis, de Bezige. Very welcome as well. Before we start with the interview, I would like to introduce Maartje Wortel. She's a Dutch writer and one of the most original and talented voices of her generation. We asked her to write an introduction to this program. So please give her a warm welcome, Maartje Wortel.
Dankjewel. Good evening, you all. Yes, I will just start. I was giving the book, The End of Eddy, on my birthday in 2018 by my ex's new girlfriend. I had taken a dislike to her because she was too intelligent, too French, too progressive, too feminist, too discerning, and too curious. In short, I felt intimidated by her. I remember that she had looked at me with kind eyes and she gave me a package containing Édouard Louis' debut novel. It's not easy to make contact with you, but you might want to read this, and if you like, we could talk about it. Whilst reading, I felt ashamed of myself because intuitively she had understood who I was. We have never talked about the book, I just said thank you, and then we became friends. We spoke about Édouard Louis for the first time after all those years last week. It was because of the book Veranderen Methode. I didn't need to ask if she had already read it, so I sat there on the sofa and started going on, oddly enough, about a short story by Clarice Lispector. It was about a Cody, a raccoon-like animal, who thinks that it's a dog. Because he doesn't know what he is, he can't convey a clear image of himself. Lispector writes that she doesn't know what will happen if he meets another Cody and finds out what he is and has to abandon his identity as a dog, plus the man who keeps him on lead. She writes about the happy embarrassment that the Cody will feel. I explained to the friend that I was angry when I read The End of Eddy because I tried to deny the feeling of self-recognition. In Veranderen Methode, Louis writes to his father, "You are an ever-present denial. Just as some people are born in a body in which they do not feel at home and which they, in a certain sense, deny until they become who they always were," describing how he, Louis, always runs away from who he is, from where he comes from. He writes that he learned to play roles because I tried to hide who I was to protect myself. He writes about his friend Elena, who introduces him to a new world, which releases a violence in his body, a beautiful violence, the violence of tearing yourself free from the possibility to form a freedom. When I read this, I said to the friend, I couldn't do anything else but think about the story of Lispector, about the Cody who finally, with violence, pulls himself free. And I thought about myself, about being a writer, and how I find myself amongst people and in places and keep thinking that I've only ended up there by accident. About my 7-year-old niece who stood on a chair to scream, and when I said that she had to calm down, she shouted, "This is our culture." About the speech that I had written for a friend who had won the PC Hoofd Literary Prize, how I heard myself beginning with the sentence, "They've asked me to do this, so there are a few laughs." How I spilled wine on a government ministered tablecloth and everyone fell silent. There are numerous examples, but that's not what this is about, thank God. It's about Veranderen Methode by Édouard Louis, which demonstrates that you can always escape and that you can never escape. that there's always a new place from which you want to move away. But the question remains, who do you leave behind then? Set apart on my favorite page in the book is, I'm sorry. Words that are addressed to the Father, but just as much to himself, to you and to me, as if the words contain both the confirmation and the denial. I showed the page to the friend and she said, I know.
Can I invite you on the stage, Édouard? Welcome in Rotterdam. Is this the first time you're here?
I think so, yes. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's my first time, but sometimes I feel so tired I don't remember where I was the day before.
Mm-hmm.
But no,
Where were you the day before? I know.
Antwerp.
Antwerp. If you weren't here for an interview, what would you do? Would you be working on your hotel room or go into the city for drinks?
No, I drink only when the sun goes down, so I would be working in the day and
Mhm.
drink in the evening.
In the evening?
I don't like to drink with the sun. For me, there are two contradictory things in
Mhm,
a way.
mhm.
Yes,
So tonight you're going to drink?
obviously.
Yes. I won't, because tomorrow is a marathon. I will run. The whole city will be the setting for the marathon. Are you going to support me? Are you going to watch the marathon tomorrow morning?
No.
No? Have you ever dreamt of running one?
No, I was always bad at sport because it was the things that the boys were good at mostly when I was a kid, and I didn't want to be with the boys as they were frightening me. My only friends were girls, which is a very gay, typical thing in a way. But and also I hate the mornings. For me, the mornings are the symbol of capitalism. You know, you see people going to work, being tired, not being happy to go to work.
What do you do in the morning?
I sleep. I never wake up before 11 because before 11 you really see the ugliness of capitalism, and sometimes it's just too hard.
Tomorrow Sunday.
Oui, but still.
Still, you see the ugliness.
No, you see the ugliness of people who have kids and pretend to be happy to have them, but are so unhappy. They would love to sleep, but they have to bring the kids to the park, and it makes them so sad, and I don't want to see that sadness. So I never leave in the morning. I avoid it.
What happens with the world after 11?
Oh, things, it's mostly the people who had suffered during the morning, it's the opportunity to finally relax. So people are a little bit more happy. And I've seen enough ugliness in my life, so I'm happy to see people smiling.
I want to ask you some questions about your writing process. Last week you posted on Instagram a photo of a printing shop in Athens. And you went here in 2019 and 2020 to print drafts, chapters, new versions of your novel, of your book, sorry, I have to say, Veranderen Methode. Are you a writer who rewrites a lot?
Yes, I am. I think like more or less all the writers, but I have this very, I don't know, I have this very painful relationship to writing. I couldn't say that I love writing. I mean, when I wake up every day, and I think, okay, I have to write, I cannot say that I do it with joy or with excitement or with happiness. I do it because I feel I have things to say, and it's the only form that I found to say the things that I have to say. I failed with all the other ways of telling them. So I feel a kind of responsibility to do it, but I cannot say that I love it. I don't love writing.
When are you happy? Are there any moments of happiness in writing? My sentence wasn't concluded. I'm not so cynical.
No, sometimes it happens. It happens kind of magically. Something is working, and you feel, I don't know, that something is happening, but it's not necessarily the best part of the book. Sometimes it's the part that you edit off afterwards. But no, of course, I start and I restart again, and this little place in Athens was a place where I would go, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times a week to reprint new chapters, and then to rewrite on the papers and to retape on the computers and to reprint. And at the beginning, I think the owner thought I was a little bit crazy. But eventually I told him, no, I'm just a writer and I don't live here, so I don't have a printer. That's why I come all day long.
Did you give him a greased copy of your books?
Yes, I did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was so supportive to me,
Okay.
of course.
About this responsibility you told before, you said in an interview that you can't afford to write fiction. Can you explain that to us?
Yes, I always felt a sense of shame of fiction. Every time that I tried to write fictional things, fictional book, fictional chapters, I suddenly felt kind of, surrounded by ghosts, like the characters in Shakespeare plays, in Richard III or in Macbeth, who have ghosts who haunt them in the night. And I had the ghost of the people that I used to know in my childhood, who would always tell me, but if you don't write about us, no one will write about us. We will disappear forever. We will vanish. We will never exist. Maybe we will exist as metaphor in other speech, but our bodies, our face, our name will never exist. And because of that, I had this, I always had this, and also it was a personal feeling that I had, because I remember when I was a early teenager, when I was still a child, one day there was Leclésio, the French writer,
the Nobel Prize winner,
who won the Nobel Prize. And I was with my family at home, and we would never hear about literature, of course, we would never hear about books, but because it was a Nobel Prize and he was French, there were a lot of things about him on TV, even on the very mainstream right-wing TV. And the TVs my parents were watching. And so suddenly I saw an interview of Leclésio, and he was saying, okay, this is how I build my characters and my chapters and and I remember thinking, but why doesn't it talk about us? We are here, real, with real pain, and he makes fake characters with fake pains. And of course, it was a childish way of thinking. I was 13 or 14. But it never prevented me from reading fiction or admiring fiction writers like Toni Morrison or Marguerite Duras, who are the most important writers in my life, probably. But me, in my body, at my place, I never got rid of that shame and of this kind of like initial trauma of I cannot write about something else. I have witnessed things that I have to talk about, and the metaphor of fiction is not enough for me. You know, right? For me, books are like love. If I'm in love with you and I want you to love me, I don't want you to love someone else as a metaphor of loving me. I want you to love me. So when I write about people, I don't want to write fictional characters as a metaphor of them. I want to write about them. I want to write about my mother. People will write books about Toni Morrison and Hillary Clinton, but no one will write a book about my mother if I don't do it.
Revenge seems to be a driving force in this book. You want revenge for your past, for the world that rejected you. Could you describe this feeling of revenge? What kind of energy is it? It's a word often being described in your book.
Because the thing is, this book, Veranderen Methode, is a book of double revenge. I first wanted to take a revenge against the milieu of my childhood, against my father, against my mother, because I hated them. I didn't love my mother, I didn't love my father. They were always blaming me for what I was. Why are you effeminate? Why do you talk like a girl? Why are you a faggot? Do you do that to make the village laugh about us and say we are the family of the faggot? And I hated it. I hated my childhood. And as a child, I had this dream to one day take my revenge against that. And I remember I was 8 or 9 years old, and I had this kind of very old thinking. I mean, it doesn't sound like a child way of thinking. I was thinking, one day I will do something more important and better and stronger than them, and they will suffer for what they did to me. I will become famous, and people will love me, and they will suffer to have told me faggot, to have told me you are nothing, to have told me you are effeminate, to have told me you are not normal. And so it was the first force who drove me. And then I escaped eventually. And strangely, this, or logically, this feeling of wanting a revenge against them turned into wanting to take a revenge for them, and to talk about these people who are invisible, who are suffering in poverty, who are suffering from exclusion, who are suffering from scholar dispossession, from everything. And so it's kind of the story of my life, and therefore the story of this book, because it's autobiographical. It's how the nature of the revenge changed, and how to take a revenge against my mother became to take a revenge for her, which doesn't mean to hide the fact that she was homophobic, or the fact that she was racist, or the fact that my whole family was voting for the far right, because I have this impression that very often in politics, when people want to stand for other people or to fight for other people, they have the idea that you have to make believe that these people are good. And I don't think so. I don't think that to fight for someone, you have to say that this person is good. So I can fight for my mother, or fight for my father, or for my brother, and against the invisibility, and against the social violence that they suffered, and not ask myself the question, are they good or do they deserve this? I think this is a capitalistic way of thinking. There is a meritocratic way of thinking. It's a way of saying you have to show that people deserve to be helped, And I am more Marxist than this. I say I fight for people whether or not they are good, whether or not they are friendly, whether or not they are kind. And it's not my question. And I think we have made in the past a big mistake in mixing love and politics, and thinking that fighting politically is a way. I fight against the conditions of life in prison. I fight against the idea of prison. I don't think that people in prison are necessarily good people. They probably did bad things. Some of them, many of them probably.
But you don't believe in the system of prison?
No, I don't. I don't believe that we can put a body in a cage. I think this is a medieval thinking, and that maybe in 400 years we will be ashamed of what we did.
400 years.
I hope it will come faster, but I think that
I hope your next book will be about it, that you can change a bit faster. The young Édouard in the book is going to school, and then he's trying to get in as many clubs as possible, to finding his talent, or finding a talent to be able to get away. What was the age that you realized that you have to escape from Hallencourt, the village you grew up?
Immediately.
You were born?
I was born and I thought, what am I doing here? In a way, no, it came very quickly, because very quickly the milieu of my childhood and my family made me understand that I wasn't welcome, that I was not normal enough. And so very early on I had this, I cannot even say this dream, it was more a lack of choice. I thought, like, I have to escape, even though I don't want to, because they will not welcome me. And so it was a little bit the story of my first book, The End of Eddy, was a story of the child I was. Oh, this is the house where I grew up. When we were living in it, because you see my little sister here.
What's the name of the dog?
Litany was her name. She's dead now. I put those pictures because when I published Eddy and I said that we live in a very destroyed place with holes in the wall and rain coming inside the house, everybody told me, of course, that I was exaggerating. And, you know, when you talk about violence in general, whether you talk about colonialism or masculine domination or homophobia, people always suspect you to exaggerate. I mean, it's the first move of the conservatory bodies against the fact.
Your book was rejected, you write, at the end of the book by many publishers, because at the end of Eddy was rejected because they didn't believe that it was true.
Yeah, but for example, even my best friends who are very clever people, that's why I love them, and they trust me, but when they saw one day the pictures of the house, they told me, oh wow, we didn't think it would be that much. And I thought like maybe pictures have a power that text doesn't have, and maybe at some other points text have a power that picture don't have. But why don't use both strengths together? I mean, I'm not the first to do it. Sebal did it. So many, Claudia Rankine did it. But I thought like, why not using the strengths of both? And so I was in this place, and at first I didn't want to escape. I mean, I've said it when I published Eddy, but my dream was first to be conform. My dream was to be normal. My dream was to be masculine. My dream was to be straight. My dream was to be good at soccer. My dream was to be attracted sexually.
And you act
to
all
girls.
these things.
I tried, but I was failing. And eventually, it's because I failed that I thought, okay, I have to escape. And as you say, suddenly it was in middle school, and I thought, okay, I will try to find a place where I would be loved and where people will like a kind of way out. And I remember it was middle school. There is a chapter about it in Changer Methode. I would go to all the clubs. There was a chess club. I went to the chess club, chess. There was a calligraphy club. I went to the calligraphy club. I was a disaster. I would put ink all over my body because I'm not a very patient person. There was a comic club. I would go to the comic club, and I hated comics. Isabelle Huppert. And there was a theater club. And I went to the theater club not because I didn't know anything about theater, but I went, and the teacher was doing the theater club, asked me to do a little improvisation. And I made an improvisation, and we were in this like gray little room, and for the first time of my life, everybody looked at me and loved me. And it never happened before in my life. People were like, clapping at me, admiring me, loving me. And I never had the impression of being loved before. I have the impression of being a source of shame and of embarrassment for everybody.
Why do you think that happened?
Because my theory is that, I say it also in the book, my theory is that as a gay boy, I was always trying to perform to be someone else. So I was kind of born an actor in spite of myself. I was performing every day, trying to be like more masculine, to have a deeper voice. I was always controlling my hands because I would do this, and everybody was telling, why do you do this with your hand when you talk? And so I was like literally sometimes doing that, don't take them away, don't take them away. And I was performing every day. And so when I went to the theater club, theater was just part of my daily life. It was an extension of my body, of my daily life.
But you were selected to act in a film with Isabelle Huppert.
How do you know that?
I did some research, but I couldn't get further. So what was the role, and was Isabelle Huppert impressed? and could you give me her number to drink coffee with her in Paris?
I can.
Yes? I know, because your mom knows her as well.
She became my mom in another movie. No, actually, it's kind of funny. It's a kind of funny story because Isabelle Huppert now is one of the artists I admire the most on Earth, and I feel that I am the son of Isabelle Huppert and Toni Morrison. I mean, they are my dream parents, I was in high school, and so. There is a connection, of course. You did it very cleverly, but with this theater club in middle school, because so I did. People loved me, and then I thought like theater is my way out, and it's what I want to do. So I was doing theater again and again, and I will escape the village because of theater. And eventually, the head of the middle school, Madame Coquet, one day told me, "Oh, there is a high school for theater. Maybe you could go there." And it was a miracle because obviously no one would go to high school in my family. I mean, it was something not for us. No, I don't have a single person in my family who would go to high school. And because of theater, he opened that door. And I went. I did an audition. I was accepted to the high school. I was confronted for the first time to another social class, and I was doing theater. And one day in this theater club, a guy came, a guy in his 30s, opened the door and he said, "Hello, I am a casting director and we are doing a movie with Isabelle Huppert." And we are looking for 2 teenagers. So since you are a theater group, we thought you could do it. So we are going to select 2 people. Please come to the audition. And all the other kids in the classrooms, they were mostly, except me and another girl, they were kids from the bourgeoisie because it was an art high school, so it was kids. Their parents brought them to theater at a very young age, they were musicians.
Did you feel different?
I felt extremely different. And when the guy said Isabelle Huppert, they were like, oh my God, Isabelle Huppert. And I didn't know who Isabelle Huppert was. I never heard her name. And they were like so impressed by the name of Isabelle Huppert. And I said, okay, I should do that audition. And I did the audition, and I was picked up with another girl. But it was like a silent role for 3 seconds. But I gave my best. I really gave my best. Isabelle, it's a movie called Copacabana. So if you watch it, you can see
Copacabana.
Copacabana, like
I will
in
watch,
Brazil.
yes.
And you can see the 14-year-old version of me with my Che Guevara hat. I was already a leftist. And Isabelle Huppert is smoking a cigarette, of course, in the bus stop, and I am next to it. So yeah, I mean...
Then the bus comes, or?
And no, someone comes with a baby, and Isabelle Huppert asks, are you looking for a nanny? I would love to be a nanny. Because she's performing like a woman who wants a new life, and she wants to prove that she's able to get a job to her daughter. But one day, and it was funny that one day Isabelle Huppert became my mother in a very bad, very cheap adaptation of my first books that I completely denied, so they had to change the title of the movie and everything. But the only good part of the movies are the parts where Isabelle Huppert is doing my mother, I have to say. She was... wow.
So she became your mother in a way, then, but in the film, then?
In the film.
In the film.
No, in the film she's performing, Isabelle Huppert performing my mother.
Oh, okay, sorry. We are going to talk about another important woman. Her name is Elena in the book. I think she's the most important one in the book. You meet her in Amiens, is it a good pronunciation, where you go to the Lyceum? You become friends. It starts with a joke, but then it soon gets very serious friendship. What is it that the 2 of you bind?
In a way, we were 2 freaks, and we were reunited by that. She is a very clever girl, at that time girl, and she was this girl who would read books all day long in the courtyard of the school. And everybody was mocking her because she was doing this, and she has like her black hairs and black traces under her eyes and everything. And so my encounter with her started with bullying, because I just arrived in the high school, and it was the first time I was confronted to another class than the working class in my life. And suddenly I felt so estranged by the others. Like they were talking about things that I never knew. They were saying they went to the theater with their parents, that they went to cinema with their parents. We had never been to cinema. They were traveling.
Did you never go in your youth to the cinema?
Just to see Harry Potter, but not with my family. With it's a long story, but, with the librarian of the village. Everything felt so strange, and also I was talking with the working class northern accent, so everybody was laughing and saying, "Oh, why do you talk like this?" Or "Why don't you have teeth?" Because my teeth were completely broken, and I had really, really broken teeth. And I felt I wanted to belong to something, and of course, like most teenagers, I did it stupidly. And there was a group of guys who once told me, "Oh, go to Assault to bully that girl because she's reading all day long." And I went to bully her, to say something stupid like, "Do you want me to fuck you?" or something. Like it was very Yes. And I was, plus knowing the fact that I was the gayest person on earth, it was kind of funny. It was grotesque. And I bullied her. And she looked at me, and it's something that it was almost magical. I mean, at the moment I bullied her, I understood that I wanted to be friend with her and not with those guys, and that I wanted to be friend with her and I wanted to know her, and I don't know, I felt welcomed by her. And then for all the days after, I've been trying to find her again. She was hiding from me because she thought I would bully her again. And I find her again eventually, and I said sorry. And she's the person who completely changed me. Gave me books for the first time of my life, bring me to theater, bring me to cinema, told me about the history of cinema, told me about everything. And she's the person through whom I've completely transformed and reinvent myself. So she's the core of that book.
And maybe as well, her parents helped you a lot. They invite you at home. You, at a certain point, you practically live with them. What was their motivation to take care of you? Did they really like you, or were they in any way patronizing?
Probably a mix of those, but I don't think that being patronizing is a problem in this kind of situation. I wanted to be patronized because I needed people to help me. I couldn't do it myself. I was not strong enough, and I needed like some people who would like completely take me into charge, you know, really. And also, this is the story of this book. This book, we talked about it this afternoon a little bit in Utrecht. This book is the story of in a way, of a complete surrender to what the bourgeoisie was expecting from me. Because I arrived in this high school and I was so ashamed of me, so ashamed of my past, so ashamed of my body, of my way of thinking, of my way of talking. I was so ashamed of all the things that I didn't know that they knew. They talk about Che Guevara, I didn't know who was Che Guevara, that's why I bought the hat after. They talked about Richard Wagner, I didn't know who was Richard Wagner. They talked about Isabelle Huppert, I didn't know. They talked about traveling, I had never traveled. And of course I was measuring the distance every day, and I was so full of shame, and I wanted to be like them. And in a way I completely submitted myself at some point to everything they were expecting from me.
Because you changed the way you speak, and even the way you laugh.
I changed the way I was speaking, I changed the way of laughing. I would practice in front of a mirror every day to practice.
Why was that so important?
Because they were telling that I was laughing very loudly, like a working class boy. That I was like, you know, and they were telling me you have to laugh like, like this.
No, not like that.
Don't open your mouth too much or anything. But in a way, for me, in a paradoxical way, or once again in a logical way, because paradox are really logical often. The thing is, it's because that I surrendered to what the dominant class was waiting for me that I am now, I feel in a way, able to challenge the class system and to challenge domination. Because in doing that, I absorb the tools and the weapons, and I can fight them with the weapon that they imposed on me. And you know, there is this very beautiful idea by Assia Djebar, the Algerian writer, who wrote a book called L'amour, la fantasia, Love, Fantasia, in which he said that the French colonizers came to Algeria, to the place where she was born, her ancestors were born, and they came and they burned the village, and they killed the men, they raped the women, they destroyed everything, and they imposed French to the Algerian colonized people. And Assia Djebar said, but because they imposed that on us, now I have the language to fight them on their own field. And in a way at a completely different level, of course, because I haven't experienced colonization, it's a completely different thing. But I had the impression that in imposing me some of the rules and some of the way of talking, a way of being, I am able now to fight. Because what would have happened if I haven't submitted myself to that in a way. And I say it with a suspension of judgment. I don't say it's good or bad to submit yourself.
I had to do in this process with your parents. You write about it, that in this period that you meet Elena and that you start to talk differently. You go back sometimes to Hallencourt, and you say that there arises a new silence between you and your father, and your mother says that you start to talk like a doctor. In my childhood, I remember that I asked my mother to wait across the corner of the school because I was ashamed of her wearing a sari. My mother is from India, and I really regret that now. Can you relate to that? How do you look back at this episode of your life?
No, of course, it was exactly the equivalent of what you were saying, but at a class level, I was so ashamed that anyone could see my family, or that there is a scene on the book I wrote about my mother where I say that one day we had to do administrative paper in high school, and the high school told me, your mother have to come. And then it became like a panic attack inside me. And I said, like, how am I going to do? Maybe can I do it for her? And as I say, no, she needs to be here. It's a big, for the inscription and everything, she has to be here, or your father. And I was so ashamed. And I thought, like, the others, they will see my mother, and she's so different from their mothers. Their mother go to theaters, their mothers are skinny, their mothers are beautiful clothes, their mother are... So I was forced to bring my mother, but before going to the train to go to the high school, I said to my mother, you don't put your finger in your nose when you talk, because I'm ashamed of that. And I thought that she was so hurt. She was so hurt, and it was so violent for her, because she understood everything that was going on. And she didn't speak for the whole day. We were there the whole day because the city was quite far. We were in the train, she didn't talk. We were walking down the street, she didn't talk. We arrived in the high school, she signed the paper, we didn't talk. We were walking next to each other. And at the end of the day, when we took the train back, she told me, so it's okay, you were not too ashamed of me? And I saw that it was so painful for her. And of course now, as we say now, I am ashamed of my shame. I am ashamed of the shame that I had at that time. But at that time, I was completely like you were saying about the sari of your mother. I was crushed by that shame. And also there was, this is what social violence creates. There was also a brutality that was created by that from my side. When I started to change, I wanted to make my family understand that I was changing. I wanted to make them understand I'm not like you anymore. Now I
read
belong.
Newspapers at home, and
I would I would bring newspaper, would not even read them, but just to show to my family I'm not like you anymore. And there was a kind of desperate attempt to, in a way, it was your opening question, one of your opening questions, a way to take my revenge over them, and to write this book for me is a way of like undoing. And as you were saying, at some point of the book, I said to my father, "I'm sorry. You are right. I say it to my father, but to me and to society and it's." You write. You directly address your father and your mother and Elena. In this book. Is it because you want an answer for them, or that you want to respond, that they respond to you? Should we read it like a letter? Not a letter, but in fact it started with the book I wrote on my father, Who Killed My Father, because the theater director asked me to write something for the stage, and I wanted to write something about my father. And when I started to write a theater piece, I had a version at some point with like my father talking and me talking, and it felt wrong. It felt not good, not authentic, not working. And then I thought, but in fact the most realistic thing is if I talk to my father and he doesn't answer me, because in fact it's kind of the structure of my relationship with my father. I try to talk to him, but he doesn't get what I say, or he cannot answer to what I say, or I try to understand his life, or I try to make him talk about his life, but in a way he was dispossessed from the possibility of seeing his own life. You know, the problem with social violence is that it's so heavy that it can dispossess you from the very possibility of seeing your own life. So for example, my father was living in poverty his whole life. If you ask him question about poverty, he will tell you, oh no, it was okay. I cannot complain. It was okay. Sometimes it was hard, and it was not okay. It was not okay. And the fact is, when you are surrounded by violence all the time, every day, in your family, in your background, you don't see the violence anymore. And so my father, he wasn't able, he's not able to see his own life. And so if I want to talk to him about him, it's like a kind of attempt to a dialogue that will never exist because of that. And so I started to write this book like this, and then this book, I wanted to continue that. It was not over for me. And also it's because I'm talking about it a lot. I've been talking about it a lot lately, but for me it's also a manifesto for the possibility of talking on behalf of other people. And because I know that...
give them a voice.
Or take their voice. Because I don't agree with the mainstream left discourse that now says you cannot talk on behalf of people, you cannot talk on the place of other people, because very often it's sociologically completely naive, because it erases the fact that social domination excludes some people from understanding what they go through. So if you say let them talk, you say let them die. Because my father will not stand. He will say it's okay. It was the same thing when I wrote the book about my mother. She was my mother when she was living with my father or with the men before. She was with men who told her to stay home, to raise the kids, to clean the house all day long, to not work, to not have a driver license, to not put makeup. My father was telling my mother, makeup is for sluts, you don't put makeup. She was crushed like this all the time. And when I was writing on her, I was talking about that with her. I was saying, and she was always telling me, oh, it's because your father, he's a moody guy, so he's always like this. And because, of course, my mother, she never got an opportunity to read Angela Davis or Simone de Beauvoir or Judith Butler or Violette Leduc. And if she writes an autobiography, she will not talk about masculine domination. And it's a problem. It's a problem. She will just say, we were poor, but it was okay, and I was with a moody guy. And so how much violence dispossesses you from the very possibility of seeing your own body? For me, saying this is in a way criticizing violence even more radically than, of course, if you say, let people speak, everybody will clap at you because it's easy to say, and everybody loves this idea, it's pleasant, but in fact, society is not pleasant. Society is not working in a pleasant way. And there are sociological aspects of it that makes it more complicated than we should think.
What was the reaction of your father of They Killed My Father, the book?
We don't talk. I talk to my father and he doesn't answer. That's really our relationship. So
I'm surprised by this answer. Did he read it? Have you asked him whether he read your book?
No, we don't talk like this with my father. We cannot talk like this. There is
I think he's very proud.
When I talk about, for example, my books, or I tell him I will be in Rotterdam next week, he blushes and he turns his head. He doesn't want to talk about it. Or in a way, but it's complicated, because in a way I think that for my father, the book about him was more difficult to receive than the other books, because in the other books I talk about the way he made other people suffer through masculine domination, through homophobia, through racism. And in this book about him, I mainly focus on the pains that he received. And I think that for him, as part of the performance of his masculinity and what it is to be a man, it's easier to think I have made other people suffer than I have suffered. you know, which I said it 1,000 times, but it is as the core of my writing, precisely like how do you change the world if the people who suffer don't want to say that they suffer. My father doesn't want to say that he suffer. And because of that, the book about him, that should be the easiest book because it's the most tender book for him, it's the most understanding book for him, and paradoxically,
monument for him
it's
as well.
in a way, it's I don't know, a statue, a tribute, I don't know, but it's the most difficult one. But if you want funny anecdotes, one day, a journalist who was writing a book about me called my father and asked, can I talk to you about your son? And my father told him, no, he said to my father, can we talk about you? Because your son wrote a book about you, and I would love to talk about your life and everything. And my father said to the journalist, my son already wrote a book on me, and everything is true. And I didn't know he had. An opinion or an idea, or
Yes.
and when I was and there was another time when I was starting to do Who Killed My Father, so the book on my father. I was doing on stage with Thomas Ostermeyer, the German director, and Thomas is my friend. And Thomas told me, "Oh, it would be my dream to meet your father." And I've never introduced my father to, anyone in my current life. It's two different lives. But because I love Thomas so much, I said, okay, why not? We were in the north and we were shooting videos for the play we did together. And I was very anxious because it was my two different lives, my father and Thomas, my friend. And I introduced my father to Thomas. And for me, it's also funny because when I was in high school, I was writing dissertations about Thomas Ostermeyer. We had exams about Thomas Ostermeyer in theater high school. He was a legend for me. And then when he became a friend, it was very bizarre at the beginning. So I have this vision of Thomas Ostermeyer as a hero of avant-garde theater. So clearly the most distant milieu from my father ever. And so I thought, how will it go? And I said to my father, oh, this is Thomas, a friend, a German director. And my father said, oh, yes, the guy who already adapted one of your books. And I thought...
I think he's a fan of you.
It's complicated, but at least he knows things. But we don't find the ground to talk about it. Language is tricky. Language is complicated.
I want to talk about, go a bit further in the, talk about the process of transformation. You use different words for it in the book. You call metamorphosis, but you call it as well the disease of becoming different. Did it become an obsession?
Yeah, I talk about a disease at the moment where I don't think that changing is a disease, on the opposite, but at some point it became really, for me in the teenagehood, an obsession to really get rid of anything from my childhood or from my past. So I thought I need different teeth, so I got different teeth. I need to lose 20 pounds. I lost 20 pounds. I need to change the color of my head. I need to change my way of laughing. I need to change my way of talking. I changed the way I would
felt
dress.
a bit uneasy sometimes while reading it.
Oh, oui, that's my goal.
Yeah. But also sometimes I had to laugh because there's this moment later on in the book with DJ Eribon, the philosopher, the writer, and he orders in a restaurant. You are together in a restaurant. You're eating, and he orders an espresso with a glass of water. And from that moment on, you will order as well espressos with a glass of water. But I'm an espresso fan. Do you like espresso?
Oh yes, I am an espresso addict.
Yeah?
As every writer, almost. I think it's a fuel that you need.
Okay, but before you never ordered espresso.
No, but for me I was 17, and to order an espresso with a glass of water sounded so much like a French philosopher thing to do. And I was so impressed. And he said, no, he said it with his very low voice. can I have an espresso with a glass of water? And I thought, wow. And from then on, it's the only thing I wanted to order, even when I didn't want it, even if I like it. Sometimes I wanted to drink something different, but I thought, this is the
Still, you
chic
ordered
thing.
then the espresso, if you wanted orange juice or...
I was in a kind of process of hyper identification and of imitation.
But there were no limits. Did you refuse to change certain things of yourself? Because
No, I had no limits. I had no limits. And I'm glad I didn't have any limits. It was also an experience, and don't get me wrong, this metamorphosis was everything we were talking about, the class violence, the humiliation, the shame, but it was also such a beautiful process of metamorphosis. And for example, when I went to court to change my name, it was very long, it took months, it took years. I had to get a lawyer, I didn't have money to pay lawyers, so I had to fill forms to get money from the state to pay for the lawyer. It was a long odyssey, and the day I got my new identification card, ID, it was one of the most beautiful days of my life. And then when people would call me Édouard, it was like a fireworks, you know. It was just, Édouard, can you give me a glass of water? And I wanted to cry. I thought wow, this is the name that I chose. And it was everybody telling me, Édouard, can you give me a glass of water? It meant, Édouard, you are free, because it's the name you chose. And every statement, even the most banal statements of the daily life, was a statement to tell me you are free, because this is the name you chose. This is the name of your freedom. This is your name of your reinvention. This is the name of what you created. And this feeling was so beautiful. But in a way, what is bizarre is that, of course, as soon as I started to change, there was a kind of suspicion toward that change from so many people who were surrounding me, who were telling me, but why would you change? You will always be Eddy in my heart, for example.
It's what Maartje Wortel writes, you can escape and you cannot escape.
Yeah, because I think there is what Pierre Bourdieu calls social reproduction, the reproduction of social classes through institutions, states, also works in the everyday life in terms of micro powers of people always keeping society as it is. So as soon as someone tries to change, you have a field of languages that are in fact not language, but they are weapons to stop you from changing. Who do you think you are? You are denying, you are not authentic, you are betraying your past. And strangely, when you have someone from the bourgeoisie who decides to break free from the bourgeoisie to grow potatoes in the field, like it often happens, people don't say you betrayed the bourgeoisie. But if you come from the working class and you study and you write books, people will always tell you, oh, but you have betrayed and left behind your past. So betrayal is always for the same people.
For the class.
And also in this kind of imitation, there was something very strange for me, because I felt that I didn't really have, not from everybody, but that I didn't really have the right to imitate other people. People found it grotesque or funny or even pretentious to, like the coffee thing, to imitate other people. And in fact, the others, the way of life was an imitation of the way of life of their social class and of their parents, but their imitation was legitimate because it came from family. And my imitation wasn't legitimate. And you know, it's what Judith Butler wrote about gender. She said, gender is always an imitation of an imitation, you know? Judith Butler said there is no marble with written how men should act or how women should act.
It is always.
But we imitate what we have seen, and then we imitate an imitation, or imitate an imitation, and imitate. So all our behaviors are imitation. But just the split in our society is the border between people who are considered legitimate imitators and illegitimate imitators. That's why if a man wants to perform like what is socially considered a woman, people will mock him or turn him down or kill him. If you are working class and you imitate the way of life of the bourgeoisie, people will tell you, you betray, you left behind, and in fact, a man is imitating a man. So if a woman decides to imitate a man, it's also an imitation. But just society don't grant you the right of imitation. But there is nothing else but imitation. We are pieces, we are fragments of imitations. But who gets the right to do so? That's the question of my book also.
I have to think where to go. I think we go to Paris after this, because after Amiens, you go to Paris. You meet a lot of men. You enter into relationships. What is it that you are looking for in them?
Gay sexuality first. I wanted it, and also a way of, and also clearly a way of changing, of finding people that would assist me in this change, because I felt so precarious in my process of metamorphosis that I
Can you explain it?
felt.
Can you explain it? What do you mean by that?
I mean, like so many class transfuge, like so many people who go from one class to the other class, I was living in the fear of coming back. I was always thinking one day I will fall back and I will work at the factory and I will live in the village and I will not eat every day like my parents and I will be... and it was my everyday fear. Every day I was thinking, I will go back to the factory. I've never been. I will go to the factory. But I will go back to my.
We'll have the life of what was meant to be, maybe.
Oh,
that you was afraid that you would have the life that was maybe meant to be
exactly.
your life. Yeah.
And in this process of fear and of change. In fact, the gay community was a community that welcomed me also. In fact, like mostly it was women like Elena or like other women that I talk about in the book, and the gay community that people welcomed me with this precariousness, with this fear, and kind of pushed me to change if I wanted to, at the rhythm I wanted to go, at the but to meet those people arriving in Paris was like a kind of collective engine of change for me, of change.
These men are quite special. There's a prince you meet. There's a man who's that rich that he owns a couch in his apartment made of the skin of polar bear. You write that you can see at a glance whether someone is rich. I can't see that, I think. How do you see?
Can't you?
No. and I mean above richness. These are men. You have a copy of the menu list of a restaurant. A relic from a long time ago, I think.
Still have it.
You still have it where you eat. You start with caviar. You drink champagne. How do you? The question is more. How do you? When you go to Paris, how do you meet those men? And
do you want numbers?
No. Isabella Huppert is enough for me, I think. Now you inspired me a bit, but
no, I met most of those people online or in gay bars, because we know that gay sociability is often a way of like more than in the rest of society breaking social ladders. I mean, it's more mixed. But there is a long tradition of like very aristocratic or bourgeois men who would have like working class partners, like Christopher Isherwood, like Oscar Wilde, like Jean Genet, like, and there is a kind of, in a certain limits, but there is a kind of mix that is more possible in the gay sociability. But everything you say now that I describe in the book was because I wanted to describe a kind of sociological mindedness that I had when I arrived in Paris, which was this drive of going as far as possible from my childhood. And once again, I'm not here to say whether it was good, whether it's not bad. I'm not a clergyman. I'm just describing a social process, an intimate process that goes through social thing.
Very honest.
And yeah, because it was this urge of saying I'm going to go as far as possible from my childhood, and then I will be saved from the childhood because I was so far. So I would go to those bars, and I was trying to meet like the most dominant person, like socially speaking, aristocrats, everything, and that's why I ended up in those castles or in those dinners with caviar, and we were drinking like those champagnes that would cost what my father would make in 2 years of work, and it also really taught me the violence of society and of social world, like those gaps that exist, that in fact we know about them, but when you experience them, it's really, really different. When you really see that bottle and you think, my father is breaking his back every day for 2 years, and this is this is something really very different feeling, and I wanted to kind of describe that as a, and so very often I didn't like them. They were right wings. They were, but I felt that I needed to be safe, and for me this is also an effect of social violence. It is the fact that I felt so uncomfortable that I had to do things that didn't necessarily wanted to do. It's okay, I'm not traumatized, I can get rid of it. But it was like this. And also at the same time, there is another aspect of it. There was also a sense of social odyssey also. There was also a source of pleasure.
The whole book, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking, I want to know the whole world.
You want to live all lives.
I want to live all the life. It's a sentence of Flaubert. It's a famous sentence of Flaubert who said, I want to live all the lives in my life. And I had this feeling that I was living with people who were so dispossessed and stuck in their lives that for me the opposite was to experience all the lives. So the intellectual life, but also the aristocracy and also the working class that I had been, and the gay sociability. And it was also a pleasure of discovery in a way. And one day I thought, okay, what I want to do is to write, and what I want to do is to fight. But it took me this long travel to know where I wanted to go.
I have one more question, and then I want to go to the audience. Your book is about escaping a youth of poverty, of humiliation, but the path you choose is not available for everyone. And I would like to ask you, for example, in Rotterdam, young people are poor. They feel excluded, but they can't go to Paris and meet men who want to help them. What kind of advice would you give to them to escape from their lives, from themselves, like you did?
I fight in the streets to fight the people who make it impossible for other people. That's what I do. I try to fight the politicians. I try to find the governments, because precisely it's not a matter of individual responsibility. It's a matter of social structures, of poverty, of social class system that prevent people to access some things. So first, I mean, this is complex because I didn't have the impression that I did it. I mean, I never had the impression of being like more free than the other people of my family, or than I was like more clever or more sensitive, or I was just less free than them in a strange way that pushed me away, because I had the social verdict, poor, and I had the sexual verdict, gay, and those two ones didn't go together, and because of that I was pushed to escape. But I didn't want to, as I was saying at the beginning. My dream was not to be Simone de Beauvoir. No. My dream was to be masculine. My dream was to be straight. I was praying to be straight. I wanted a cure. I wanted to see doctors. I felt sick with what I was.
You had a girlfriend.
I had a girlfriend.
You slept with her.
Yes,
it is in the end of Eddy.
Tragically.
Or try to.
I
remembered. Yeah.
But the thing is, no, I tried, I couldn't, I was pushing, but the thing is, I said it, so sorry for the people because it was one of the cornerstones of Eddy when I published it, but I wanted to break free from from the narrative of the outsider, you know, who grew up in a working class family, but is more sensitive or more clever or stronger, then he escapes, you know, which is like the mainstream basic narrative, you know, like Billy Elliot, or even
I thought immediately of it, yes.
or even if in the most sophisticated literature, like in The Red and the Black from Stendhal, you know, the very first scene of the book of Stendhal is Julien Sorel, the protagonist. He is in a tree reading a book, and his father is cutting wood, and he's like mumbling, screaming, and one is so light on the tree, and the other is like this awful person. And I wanted to break from that. And I think like this narrative is really shaping so much of the literature, even in the contemporary literature. And I wanted to show that this trajectory that was my trajectory was due to social forces that were bigger than me. Humiliation, sexual shame, lack of love from my family, all those things together that didn't let me free. That I couldn't. As I always say, if you had come to my village when I was 10 years old, and you told me, okay, either you go to Paris and you will write book and you will meet people, or you stay in the village and you become the most masculine and you become straight, and I would have said, I stay. I wanted to stay. And so, but in saying that, for me, it's a political statement, because it means that you are not born different, but you become different. Like Simone de Beauvoir said about women, you are not born a woman, you become a woman. And it's the same thing with what we call difference. So what we call, I wasn't born an outsider. There was social collective mechanism that eventually becomes individual, of course, because at some point you really want to escape because you have no choice, and you make efforts, but because there is something bigger than you. And so it's a way of saying, like, what do you do to make other people different? Don't just wait, like when you read The Red and the Black and you say, oh my God, Julien Sorel is so different from the rest of his family. He's so sensitive and they are so brutal and they scream when they talk. Then it puts you in a very passive situation where you just say, oh wow, wonderful, some of them escape. And it kind of reproduces a mythology, a violent mythology of class. And what it is to say, I wasn't different. I was probably less different than my brother, or than my. I was not a wonder kid. I was not special. But some things, some encounters, made it this way. And so that's why it's difficult for me to say what I would say to a young person like this. But I can say to the people who are in power, what are you doing to make it possible? Because it's not individual, it's a social and collective thing.
Are you hopeful for French because the elections are coming? When you talk, you want to make a change there.
No, of course I will vote for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. I will vote for the left. I wrote text to tell people to vote as much as possible for the left. So, of course I hope. Of course it will be complicated because the far right is extremely powerful. Because of years and years of political issues and agenda of the left abandoning the working class people, leaving the working class people to the far right. As a protest,
they vote far right.
Yes, exactly. They have the impression of being represented by the far right, without seeing the lies of the far right, the violence, the anti-working class violence of the far right, the racism, of course. So yeah, this is really a matter of a political agenda. And of course, I don't want to take this book, Changer Méthode, as what people should do to change. I mean, there are so many ways of changing, and I'm talking about one way of changing. But I don't think that it's superior to write a book than to open a bakery, for example, obviously. The question is, what do society impose on you, and what is the gap you can put between society's expectations and what you do? This is what I call change, and it's not necessarily going to Paris, writing books. It's just the matter of emancipation. And so I write through my personal stories, but those stories can be different, of course.
Thank you. I want to go to the audience. Christian has a microphone. I think we can do 5 questions, depending the length of the answers as well. Who wants to ask a question? Yes. One moment for the mic.
Oh, this is very brave because the first one is always so difficult.
And I will be holding on to the mic.
Now that you know more about literature and philosophy, are there any real or fictional role models you wish you would have met earlier?
I mean, I clearly, I wish, particularly in my childhood, I wish I had read some literature about homosexuality, for example, to know that it was something possible, to know that it was a way of being that was possible among other possibilities. And I didn't know that. Like my family and my milieu was hiding my history to me. I didn't know there was people like Proust or like Coltès or like Beauvoir or like Genet. And I wish I had discovered it. You know, I like to make this little joke to say I was a little bit like Harry Potter when we, like the people he grew up with, they hide his history from him. And they hide him the fact that he's a magician. And they were hiding me that I had a whole world waiting for me, fighting for me. Pedro Almodovar, Jane Campion, Gus Van Sant, Marcel Proust, Violette Leduc. And all these people were fighting to make my life possible. But my family was hiding it from me, my whole milieu, my whole childhood. So I really wish I had access to that earlier. But when I discovered them afterwards, it was a beautiful fireworks. And it made me probably, stronger in a way. So it's okay. But yes, I think this is obviously the important part. And then as soon as I started to read books and literature, I was reading a lot of fiction. I'm still, of course, I don't write fiction, but I read fiction a lot. So clearly Toni Morrison, Marguerite Duras, as I was saying, they would be two of my absolute best. And but yes, William Faulkner also. But I had the chance to meet Toni Morrison when she was alive, and it was, wow, she was one of the most incredible human on earth.
Next question.
There,
Oh,
in the
yes,
shadows.
oh, yes. Over there in the shadow.
Cannot we give you light?
He will hold on to the microphone. It's not too far. So you've written about your youth, about your parents. Do you have any ambitions for the future? What do you want to write about? Do you want to continue writing?
Yes. It's bizarre because often people tells me, "Oh, you are almost 30 years old, but you already wrote 5 autobiographical books. Then you will, what will you say?" And it's, for me, this question is very bizarre because I have the opposite feeling. I'm like, how am I going to do in one life to tell all those stories that I want to tell? I would need 5 lives to tell the 15 first years of my life. Because the reality is so full of so many things. I mean, you can write 500 pages about 1 hour interaction. It's obviously something possible. So there are things that I want to write about. I am writing for the next project. So yes, I will. Even though I always live, but it's maybe banal, but I always dream of the day when I will stop writing.
But could you tell something about the project, the next project?
Should I?
If you want.
No,
it stays in Rotterdam.
No, I'm writing a book about alcoholism, depression, and domestic violence.
Is it also about your brother, who was already an alcoholist before his 20th year?
Yeah, it was about my brother. And in fact, it's funny because it's linked to your question. The thing is, I didn't want to. I thought, okay, I published Changer Methode, and I thought maybe I want to write something. I mean, this is a book of metamorphosis, so it's not my heaviest book. I wrote more violent books sometimes. But I thought maybe I should write something with more light in it, and I thought of writing a book about sexuality eventually. And I started a book about sexuality, and then in January my brother died, and he was 36 years old, and he had no disease, he had no cancer, he had no car accident. He just died because he was this working class guy, desperate with his life, drinking, violent with other people, violent with himself, violent with women. And when he died, I felt those ghost things again that I was mentioning. I thought I cannot write about something else, like what it is, those guys who die at 36 years old, that guys who have their lives completely broken, destroyed into pieces so quickly, so young. And so I had this feeling of shame, and then I said, okay, I have to write about my brother to understand why was he like this. I hadn't seen him in 11 years, so it's a huge part of my life without seeing him and wanting to understand what happened, who he was, why did he do that, why was he beating women, why did he kill himself by drinking so much. And so yeah, I started, and I wish people had more shame when they write, in a way. I think that so many people are writing without shame. And for me, it's a problem. I think that shame, we talked about the bad aspect of shame, but there is also a beautiful aspect of shame sometimes, which is, for example, in literature. When I go in bookstore in Paris and I see so many people, from the dominant class, from the bourgeoisie in Paris, who write about their divorce in Paris, who write about when they lost their bike at 10 years old. I'm not kidding, there are real books who talk about that. And I always think, like, how could they write without shame, in a way? When you see, I don't know, masculine domination, when you see migrants dying in the sea, when you see... I wish we could spread more shame in the world for people to think, like, what am I going to write about? Who am I going to talk about? Not everybody. I don't say we should write only terrible books. I'm also, when Proust writes about love, when Ernest writes about love and passion and desire, I love it too. I don't want everyone to be Édouard Louis. I would die in a world like this. I don't want that. I want some people who do different things. But clearly, more shame would be welcome. Would be welcome, and that's why I continue writing, because of that shame in a way. So it was a long answer.
Another question here in front of. Sorry.
Yes, I'm very nervous to ask a question.
Don't be.
But I will. Yeah, so I wanted to say, I hope, you said that your brother doesn't have a disease. Maybe you find the disease that he has. The question I want to ask is, you talk about the day that you sort of got your new name accepted, and you said, I wanted to cry. Did you?
Yes, I did. Okay, I cry quite easily. I always cry. I always cry in the cinema. I always cry when I read a book. I always cry. I make my friends ashamed sometimes because I cry too much, and everybody look at me in the cinema. But no, I did, and frankly, it's one of the most beautiful feeling that I would love everybody to experience it, and to have a different name. And I remember when I went to court to change the name, there was the judge who was here. She was a she, and she was nice, but she was challenging. I mean, nice judges are not so often. We don't see them so often. So she was one. So it's important to say it. But then at some point she told me, if you want to change a name, the risk is that we will live in a society where everybody wants to change their name every day. And when she said that, I thought, yes, such a dream. Such a dream to live in a society where we can change our names every day, when we can be a different person every day. I would love to not be Édouard Louis as a name anymore. I would love to have a different name. I love Pessoa, who changed his name like 120 times, not legally because it was difficult, but when in his writing and everything. And there is a little story, 20 seconds, I have no choice but to say it because it's too beautiful. You know, there is a French gay writer, Hervé Guibert, who died from AIDS in the 80s, and he was a very close friend of Michel Foucault, the French philosopher who also died from AIDS a few years later. And you know, in the 80s, when AIDS was starting, people were dying, there were no treatments, the laboratories were stopping the treatments to make more money at some point. So people were dying, as we all know, millions of people. And so in Paris, they started to build those kind of institutions, like center hospital, where people who got AIDS would go, and eventually almost all of them would die quickly. And when Foucault, Hervé Guibert tells it in his book called À l'ami qui ne m'a pas changé la vie, to the friend who didn't change my life, who didn't save my life. And Hervé Guibert says that when Foucault knew he was sick from AIDS, he told to Hervé Guibert, can you imagine if those institutions where we go to die, those little hospitals where we go to die, can you imagine if they were a joke? And in fact, people would go inside those hospitals, and everybody thinks they will be dead, because if you enter there, you are dead. But in fact, there would be a little hidden secret back door at the back of the institution, and people would go out. Everybody thinks they are dead, and they can start a new life with a new name, with a new body, with a new group of friends. And it was Foucault's dream. And in fact, it's my dream. A society, can we create an institution in which we give shelter to people to go and go back another door and being someone else suddenly? I want, in a way, my dream would be that my novels are this institution. I want my novels to be an institution that people use to change. So yes, it's really, really a beautiful thing.
And would you go there as well to again
immediately
transform? Yes?
Yeah, of course, I go right now.
Right now. One or two questions, yes? This enthusiastic lady.
You were saying that you actually wanted to stay in the village if you would have the choice. And is the fact that you're writing autobiographically is one of the reasons maybe to stay in the village? It makes you able to stay in the village through your books?
That's a strange question. I don't know, perhaps, yes, in a way. I mean, it's one of the last sentences of Changer Methode where I say that I hated my childhood, and paradoxically I am nostalgic of my childhood, and how it is to be nostalgic of something you hated. It's very bizarre. Is it youth that I miss? Is it the childhood that I miss? I don't know. There is a kind of also Sovietic aspect of childhood in which, you know, you have a bigger structure that takes care of you. They give you a home, they give you food, they give you clothes. You don't have to pay attention with it. Like in a Sovietic context, they don't let you free. They don't treat you very nicely. But you have this kind of, you know, there is a name for the nostalgia of the Eastern Bloc, even for the people who didn't like the lack of freedom. It's called nostalgia. This is a nostalgia of the East Bloc. And in a way, I feel nostalgic of my childhood. I know it was a Sovietic awful regime, but in fact, in this kind of bubble, I don't like adult life. I don't like this. And yes, also it's a way of like Because now, when I try to go to the village, I have the impression that I am not in the village anymore. I have the impression that I'm in front of the village, but I'm facing the village. But even when I'm in the middle of the street, I'm facing the village. I cannot be in it anymore, because what we call a place is not a place. What we call a place is the connection between an habitus, a person, a being, and a place. And the place as such doesn't exist, clearly. And so the place, I cannot be in it because there is no connection, and also I have to go in the night. The time I went in the night because in the day I'm afraid of my cousins who would kill me if I go there. And so I go in the night with a hoodie like this because I'm afraid. But also it's a way of trying to be there, as you say, and to talk about this place, because also, you know, when you are in this place, you also have it's a village, so you also have the feeling of a lie, you know, because you have it's the countryside, so little houses, little trees, some houses are really broken, like mine when I was, but it's not most of them, it's a few of them. And then when you see what people endure in this village, you know, there is a sense of this geography in front of me is lying about what is going on, really. And probably to write the book is a way of trying to reach the truth that the image is hiding from us, because it can look almost like a charming little village if you go around. But I know from inside that it's different, that it's more complicated than that. Oui.
The last question. Who? I think over there.
My question is more along the same lines. You were talking about leaving the village, but at the same time, in different books, you're also describing that you kind of reconnect with those old feelings quite easily, and your family recognizes that as well. You talk about your sister, for instance, in Histoire de la Violence. And she's describing that double movement, more or less. You come back to the village, or to those relations. It isn't the place. But you seem to settle into that quite easily, at least, as well.
Yes, in a way, because so it would be paradoxical compared to what I just told you. But there is a sense of not being able to come back, but also there is a sense of understanding the childhood better now that I have left it. You know, because I understood my childhood after I've experienced my childhood. I didn't understand my childhood when I was experiencing it. I thought when my parents were telling me, "Oh, why are you a faggot, or why do you talk like this?" I hated them. I blamed them for them. And it's only when I left that I understood that it was part of something bigger, of social rejection, of homophobia, of the culture of masculinity in the working class. And so I saw my childhood, after living it, and it's really also the core of Changer Methode is of course you understand one reality in its connection with other realities, you know? It's what Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher, calls la trace, the trace, is that the reality is defined by the traces between this reality and the other's realities, you know? And as I wrote about in the book of my father, for him to be a man or to perform masculinity was to not be a woman, to not be a faggot, to not act like a gay person, to eat a lot of food and not small food like women, to not cross his legs like the men of the bourgeoisie or the woman, to not, and every statement of his identity was a relationship with others' identity. And the class system works the same way. You don't understand masculinity if you don't understand homosexuality, if you don't understand homophobia, lesbophobia, transphobia, masculine domination, because the truth of it is outside of it. And it's the same thing with the class. I understood the village and the working class the days that I saw other things, the days that I saw those people drinking 3,000 euros bottle of champagne, the days that I saw other worlds, relationship to culture, and so that's why probably I dive in more. And I think that if we want to understand the world truthfully, we have to think in this structural way. If you don't get the structure, you don't get anything, because they are defined by each other. And even the dominant class, when I arrived in high school, I saw how much they were defined by the rejection of working class people. Like, don't laugh too loud like the working class. Don't open your mouth too much. Don't hit chips like the working class people at the station who were with the pack of chips. Or don't, like, those caricatural things, but actually it was what was going on. And the identity was like a paranoid rejection at every second of the working class ways of being, way of talking, way of eating, way of... and so that's why, yeah, all the books that I try to write are this structure, but I need to complete the structure because it's bigger than expected.
Thank you, Édouard,
Thank you so much.
for your answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just for a souvenir.
We have another program this Monday with Ron Meijer. His book, De Onmisbare, is really a strong book on social class. I read it, it's great. We have still tickets in het Wijkpaleis. On May 12th, Cody Hoogstenbach, who is here. Where are you, Cody? Cody is there. Who wrote a beautiful book, a very strong book about the housing crisis. I think you would really like to meet Cody. He's great. And we conclude our series with Naida Aurangzeb on May 30th in het Wijkpaleis. Édouard Louis will be signing. We have here the bookshop, the local bookshop, Voorheen van Gennep. Monique is here. Do you have any copies of the Boekenweekgeschenk as well? Yes? Yeah, with it. Édouard will be signing here, I propose. Do you have a pen? Shall I get a pen? Yes. What do you want to drink? Water is fine, yes?
When I'm working, I'm very professional.
I will give you a hand because I will run tomorrow, so I go directly into bed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your generosity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.